Okay, so a couple of things went down, and I'm sure you've heard some of it, and I'm also sure you've heard only part of what actually happened. Valve Software, as of the day of recording, which is January 10th, 2024, Valve Software has taken down two major community endeavors that do utilize Valve Software's own intellectual property. Portal 64, which was a full demake of the original Portal that runs natively on the Nintendo 64, and Team Fortress 2 Source 2, a community-created mode for Gary Newman's Sandbox, Sandbox being the spiritual successor to Gary's mod running on Valve's Source 2 engine. Team Fortress 2 Source 2 was the brainchild of a couple of major Team Fortress 2 community members and has been in development for years now, getting to the point where it was pretty playable, pretty enjoyable, and an excellent reprieve from retail Team Fortress 2.
Where are we at?
Valve sent a DMCA takedown notice to GitHub, which hosted the source code for TF2 Source 2, which was entirely owned by the creators of TF2S2. It was original code. It did, however, use intellectual property that Valve owned, and they took it down. Portal 64, however, was being taken down because it was utilizing Nintendo-owned libraries in order to run properly and natively on a Nintendo 64. So the Portal 64 takedown is more than likely Nintendo doing their normal thing. The Team Fortress 2 Source 2 takedown is Valve doing their best impression of their best friends over in Japan, Nintendo. This is unprecedented for Valve Software. Remember what I just said, Team Fortress 2 Source 2 is not a standalone game. It runs in Sandbox. Sandbox is the spiritual successor to Gary's mod. Sandbox runs on Valve's own engine. This is akin to Valve taking down a Gary's mod game mode because it utilizes their own IP. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but the optics are clear. Valve is a very different company than they used to be. There have been some changes, and we'll get to that. A couple of years ago, Valve was already showing some disdain for what was going on in Gary Newman's Sandbox. Gabe Follower, another Valve-centric YouTube channel, made Counter-Strike Global Offensive a few years ago running in Sandbox, and Valve demanded that that be taken down. At the time, conversations were going on related to trying to allow certain Valve IP to exist within the Sandbox ecosystem. The difference here is that unlike Gary's mod, which shipped with things like the Half-Life 2 assets, Sandbox is entirely standalone, and the same kind of franchise sharing and intellectual property sharing doesn't necessarily exist. The takedown of Team Fortress 2 Source 2 tells me that whatever kind of conversation that was attempted failed, and if I were to take a guess, Valve was not participating because that's their MO. So Team Fortress 2 Source 2 is gone. That really sucks because it's developed by a lot of incredibly talented mod developers that if this were the late 90s or early 2000s, Valve would have hired by now. Instead, they're sent a DMCA takedown notice. This comes the day after Valve announces that they are totally cool with adding any video games onto the Steam platform that utilizes generative AI, as long as the creators of the games that utilize said generative AI can prove that they own the copyright of the data used within said generative AI. That system is going to be such a mess. I have no idea what Valve is thinking. How are they going to be able to do that without just not allowing the majority of generative AI programs to exist in the first place? How are they going to be able to prove it across the board? How are they going to be able to differentiate people reporting content that uses AI, whether or not it's a legal version of AI? It's such a hot button issue that I find it very strange that Valve would actually step out of their comfort zone and say something about it in an approving manner. Remember, Valve Software said they wanted nothing to do with crypto on the Steam platform. So it seems as if the internal philosophy of burgeoning technologies that are unknown and still growing have changed. It also seems that Valve's opinion of derivative community-created work has changed for the negative. And this is where we talk about an even more depressing situation that is not being highly publicized. There is another community-created free project out there that is incredible. It is so good that I will not be naming by name or even mentioning any of the individuals involved in the project for a good reason. This is a project that I was working on a video for and had to stop about 2 months ago because other YouTubers that had produced content on this project had their videos copyright striked by someone claiming to be a lawyer at Valve Software. Let me repeat, YouTubers were getting copyright strikes from Valve because they were talking about a community derivative project. So I stopped production on that video. The individuals that work on this community team thought maybe it was just impersonating Valve Software. This is not the orange box Valve. This is a very different company. And I am fairly confident in saying, in my own mind, Valve recently hired new legal counsel, someone new with a background in law. All of this happening very shortly after that hire makes a lot of sense, but it sets a weird and upsetting precedent. Yes, you can argue that because it was in Sandbox and Valve didn't have complete control over it, it's not the same as if Valve were to take down a mod. And that's technically true. The problem is Valve doesn't support their modding tools anymore at all. And because of that, people have turned to other platforms to be able to develop on modern systems, and Valve is taking those things down. This is the same Valve that demanded Open Fortress take their mods down and told them straight up that they would create a platform to allow them to exist legally. Well, they told them that and then never followed through on it, and then ghosted the developers for like a year. Valve doesn't give a shit about community projects anymore, even though they did recently hire one of the best Half-Life Alyx map creators. And if you make a Valve fan project that doesn't run directly on the Source engine, I would reconsider, because now there's a precedent that they may send you a DMCA. Valve is doing their best Nintendo impression, and wow, this sucks. But hey, I mean, to fill the void, why don't you go enjoy the Steam Capitalism and Economy Fest until January 15th. Woo! I'm Tyler McVicker, the Passionate Gamer. If you want to keep up with this, we're having a lot of conversations on my Discord server. The invite link is down in the description below. And I'll talk to y'all later. Peace and hair grease. I hope you're having a good life. Adios.